Welcome, good morning. Shall we talk in German? Come on, we are an innovation hub somewhere. Let's be flexible, but let's stick to English and not to Russian today in the morning. Now, as I saw in your program, we will talk a lot about science, science management, organizational science, and the big thing probably is the big question, what is science actually about and what is the role of science in society? Let's think about that. Let's raise a simple, very simple question. What do we need any science for? Let's be critical to ourselves. It's easy for us being scientists. What we do is, we always say, yes, we need science, and we need more science and more science and more science. But what for? What for actually? You could argue we need science because it generates something new, but you don't answer the question, do we need something new? Really, let's be quite firm sometimes. I tell you one small story from my personal life. I'm one of the traditional old people. I prefer and I love and adore a good old mobile phone. I should have it, no, I have it over here. I have a phone. I'm fully reluctant towards any smartphone. I have two little children, they don't understand me. They don't understand how I can use that old thing. I said, I only need it just to make a call or to send an SMS. And if I see them, small little children just sitting there, having a smartphone, like wish, whatever they do with their fingers, I don't know and I don't want to know. But it's the point. I ask myself, what do I need it for? It's got too many functions and it takes me ages until I understand what the thing can do. So why should I do it? The same or similar thing actually is going on. Look at automobiles, cars. Remember 20 years ago when your parents probably yourself bought your first car, what did you do? You bought a car with one strong characteristic and feature. You could repair it yourself. If there was a damage and your car was broken down on the highway, what did you do? You left your car and you fixed it manually. You buy a car nowadays, you cannot do anything. If you're lucky, you can change the tires. That's it. Don't do anything else. The car is such a sophisticated thing. If you open it and you want to see the engine of your car, you don't see an engine. The only thing you see is a black box. And the black box only works first if you write all information inside the black box, which is called the engine. So that is the times are changing, and of course, our perception is changing. The question arises, is it good for us or not? We never know. That's why we simply enter a game, and we simply do. And probably the major reason why we are doing science is human beings, which we are curious people. We want to know everything. So when I say we want to know everything, I'm not talking about we want to know where everybody walks or things like that. Not such things. But we want to know how does the world work? What are the basics? What makes the world go around? Or what the hell is going on here in the sky? Why do we have clouds? How can we manipulate if we want to? How can we build a bridge to enter the moon, the Mars, and all that stuff? Just make our life more comfortable, make our life more easy. So we need to keep it in mind when thinking about and asking ourselves, how should we organize a science system in a country? That question is quite often raised, especially from the political side. Policymakers always been confronted with two challenges. First, we have a lot of international benchmarks, rankings, and all that stuff, and each country is very proud saying, yes, we are the best in science and innovation. That's why we are the best. That is the common belief. And you see it, you read it every year, actually every month somewhere, especially in times when election periods comes. Each politician will stand up and say, oh, we need to be the best in science and innovation. That makes our life much easier. Nobody tells you how to organize. Now, secondly, we have the common belief that science leads to societal value. And we think The more smart we are, the more we understand, the better we are living. Indeed, if you think back something like 100 years ago, life expectancy was something like 50, 60 years. Now we have life expectancy 80, 90 years, which is mainly, or also at least to some part, due to scientific breakthroughs in medicine, also in physics, chemistry, and all that stuff. So it's quite interrelated and intercorrelated everything. Now let's start with some words. I think you don't need to photocopy or to try to write it down. I assume you will have the slides later on. If not, just give me a message. I will send it to you. Now, first of all, what are the challenges actually we are confronted? First of all, remember when I said in the beginning, the expectancy or the expectations are rare and are very strong, that science delivers value. Now, that is something science has to prove. We are talking here mainly about public funding. So it's taxpayers' money, we are investing for something, so it's not like you sitting here, you're wasting the money. You're burning the money, investing, or at least you're responsible for the expenditures. But still keep in mind, next to you there are 10 more people in the country who generate cash, who generate tax revenues which you spend. We need to keep that in mind. Unfortunately, what happens is
but the taxpayer asks, I'm giving you my money, and I'm just seeing you going to a lab and enjoying this one, enjoying freedom of your mind without any pressure. Why should I do that? Everybody will ask. Everybody is faced and pushed. Their performance evaluations, they are controlled and monitored and steered. What is your performance every day, every day? So nobody has the freedom of thinking. That's what we can afford. We just go to our office, to our lab or whatever, and we start, let's try this. It doesn't work. Okay, so what? Let's try this. That is the freedom of thinking and thoughts. It's unpredictable to some extent. And now the big challenge is, of course, when it comes to financing, we need sufficient financial resources, not only for human resources expenditure, equipment, materials, all that stuff, different issues. But at the same time, we need to justify why that freedom we enjoy in the science sphere leads to the social and societal improvements. Now, what is changing globally? We are not talking about Russia only. What is changing in all countries in the world is the big question, who actually should finance that? There's a common belief that private sector could also finance, not only taxpayer. Let's see if it works or not. Why actually, the second question, the big one, why do we have a social investment, taxpayers' money, public money, but the returns, when it comes to innovation, are privatized? So the people, actually, that's the contradiction. We expect people working in the lab, enjoying freedom of thinking, enjoying the public money being spent. One day they say, oh, we made a big invention, now let's ask them to sell their invention in the market and earn a lot of money. Why should you do that? You give them presents, you grant them, you equip them with money, and 5 years later they come back and they're the richest man in the world. It's very simple spoken. It's not right. But why should you? At the first sight you will say, no, it doesn't work. And especially that here, that social investment versus private returns, that is an issue which is very high on the agenda in the European countries. Remember back in 2008 when we had the financial crisis in Europe, the banking system close to collapse and all that stuff. What did governments do? They took taxpayers' money, billions of euros. They didn't take peanuts. They gave it to the banks to save them, to save the social systems and the economic systems at all. But now the call is coming. We took public money to privatize returns because we see banking now, they continue paying high wages. They have the extraordinarily high profits and stuff like that. Why should we do that? That is a question which is coming also for the science sphere. But the answer here is actually quite simple. If you consider science and money for science not expenditure, but investment, meaning that society is investing in the individual scientist, expecting you deliver some value which diffuses and contributes to everybody, be it either in, say, for example, in medicine, in your drugs and new medicine, which increases your life expectancy or eases the pains from certain illness. That is one thing. But also when, when you're starting to commercialize your invention, clearly you're subject to being paid to paying tax. Now, once you start paying taxes from your invention, which was made from public funding, you give something back to society. So it's a nice equation eventually. The question arises also, what is science nowadays? Science has changed a little bit over the last centuries and also decades. If you start thinking, and if I ask you, what is the definition of what is actually nanotechnology? Everybody will start giving a lecture which lasts 1 or 2 days, because nanotech includes so many different fields of science. We don't have the traditional individual science fields anymore. So the issue arises, we have limited public funding. Which are the priorities to invest in the science field? Do we invest in, say, nanotech? That's investing in everything but nothing. The same for biotech. It's more dedicated, it's more specific. Now, again, kind of a vicious circle. If you say investment in nanotech in a certain field, only there, and you forget that the underlying, the basis is also mathematics, it's also physics, it's also chemistry, and so on and so on. If you neglect that, then the nanotech thing will not survive. Well, it's the big challenge. It's a kind of a vicious circle. No solution so far globally. And when we come to saying global science is nothing which happens only in Moscow or in Vladivostok or Novosibirsk, Cambridge, UK or Cambridge, US, whatever. Science is a global thing, and you know it. What happens actually? The first thing you're doing in the morning hours, coming to your office, opening your email box, reading the emails, and the letters not only come from your colleague next door, but from the colleagues across the ocean, across the time zones. What you're doing is talking about new ideas or talking about, hey, I have a question here, do you have an idea how to solve the question, the issue? So it's quite a community, and it's people in the community, regardless where they come from. But it's quite the funny thing, which causes some problems as well, which we'll see also a little bit later. It becomes also an issue when it comes to human resources and people who are doing that. That is something which we call competition for talent. We see it clearly. What's happening here in Skолkovо? Skолkovо is not designed attracting, well, say average or below average human capital. No. It's about the best of the best. And that is the competition actually which is going on everywhere. You have a lot of different technoparks, science cities, universities, and all that stuff. Everybody wants to attract the best of the best everywhere. A funny story, not sure who of you are aware and informed about Germany. The Germans, I'm a German, that's why I'm asking. The Germans, we did one great thing. 6-7 years ago, the Germans launched the initiative we called it the Excellence Initiative. So universities becoming excellent universities. Good thing, not bad. But today, I think status last month, we have 78 excellence universities in Germany. A 7 and an 8. 78. In my understanding, if something is excellent, then there is only a small number. 78 universities calling themselves universities of excellence. So what? So what you're doing is taking the average performance, call it excellence now, and next time you can probably initiate a competition for the best of excellence universities or something like that. So that is an issue. Either really excellence and stick to it, and don't make it broader and broader and broader, and everybody calls himself, I'm the excellent, I'm more than excellent, and so on and so on. Maybe everybody's excellent in something different, but it needs to go together and needs to build a broader picture. So I'm not talking about German science. So the competition for talent, that is based actually on the brains, on designing the framework condition and making people going there. A nice example in that relation is, I think, Switzerland, Zurich. Anybody of you is having contacts with Zurich, with the Swiss? ETH, Eidgenössische Technische Hochschule. ETH Zurich, good place. In terms of people and the minds and the brains, excellent. No doubts about that. And the rankings very, very high. In addition, when Zurich says we want to enter into competition and want to attract the best people here to Zurich, they offer very nice salary. But what else do they offer? Once you've been to Zurich, you know exactly. You enter into Zurich and you enter into a city which is somehow, well, very calm, a little bit lower, a little bit slower. You have a very beautiful lake, you've got the Alps, you have a living standard there, which is simply great. It's very much here, in that case, in the competition for talent, it's very much about how do people feel to live in a certain place. There's one common thing, one common feature between Moscow and Zurich. You will realize when you enter Moscow airport, regardless where, migration people and customs people are extraordinarily friendly. If you arrive in Frankfurt, in Berlin, in Germany, you better leave the country ASAP. If you arrive in Zurich, and unbelievably incredible, the Zurich migration people, they smile at you, ask you, how was your flight? It's like, it's the very first thing. And that makes the soft skills, the soft part of the whole game when it comes to competition. When you arrive in Zurich, you feel quite, not bad, so I could feel well here. So when you have the decision or when you have the choice, taking a position between different universities or research labs, you will probably not only focus at the salary, you will also focus, could I live here, could I feel well, and not only about me. Scientist is usually not a single person. Quite often it happens that a scientist might be married, even worse with children. Even worse, now it's a little bit more joking. And then you make a picture of the whole constellation, of the whole setup where you're going. Could you survive there? Could you feel well there? Not only you, but also your partner. And that might be the case in Zurich. When we talk about Switzerland, the contrary you will find in Lausanne. Lausanne, you have the second ETH, that's the EPFL, École Fédérale Polytechnique Lausanne. So EPFL is also very, very good, but you arrive in Geneva airport. And Geneva, that is the Roman part, the French-speaking part of Switzerland, slightly different. You're not, probably the feeling is not so warm and not so cozy. So Zurich has a very strong advantage in standards. Now, before going into too many episodes, let's have a quick look how actually the whole system should be or could be structured to analyze when thinking about how to organize science. First of all, science is something like knowledge, technology. It's developed and generated somewhere. Let's not talk about where exactly now. It could be universities, could be the research institutions, like Russian Academy of Science here, but also not forget about you have engineering companies. You have a lot of companies, or consulting companies even, in social science, developing new knowledge. And in knowledge, it's regardless here, it's not the question, is it radical new knowledge or is it just marginal? Sometimes you don't always have to develop and invent a new formula fully, or some small modification. Sometimes it's fully sufficient. On the other hand, you have the demand side. That is the problem which we have here in science, we don't have a real market. Like a market which we know as usual when you say you have a product and you will find someone who buys it. Science is nothing which has a market immediately now. There's only a few people who understand actually what is coming out from here. It's very much because the people are too free in their thoughts. And then leaving the lab and you're talking to someone who's not engaged in that business, they will tell you, I don't understand what you're talking about. And you might have a big vision and a big illusion or whatsoever, but it's nothing which people who are occupied in their daily operations can easily grasp. What you will be confronted with the outcome here is just explain and make it understandable. Not in your own technical language. Nobody out in the world understands. Only your small community understands. That is a big issue. That's why with this side, like demand side, using that knowledge, we have some parties in the middle, like mediators or transfer officers or things like that. What we should not forget about is that between both parties, there are natural, grown and born direct relations. It can be your colleagues, graduates, it can be friends from school or whatsoever. It is a clear issue. Just if you think about your daily life and your daily work routines, if you have a problem, the first thing you do is ask someone you know. Best someone you know from the kindergarten early on already. It's an issue of trust. Because, again, nobody really understands what you're talking about. That's the first thing. And the second thing, as a scientist, you will always think about, ouch, what can I disclose? What can I say? What can I talk about? Why is that? It might happen if you talk about your idea or you talk about the first finding from your work in the lab. It might happen that the person you're telling that is preparing quickly a nice paper, a nice article, and next month you will find your way to journal and you will say, that asshole. I told him, I found that. He didn't do anything about that, but he published it now. What's the problem now? Actually, it's your own personal pride, but there's a real problem behind that. That is the management of your institute or the university who will tell you, you didn't publish and you cannot publish your own invention anymore because you told anybody else. That's the problem. So if you have a very strong relationship with someone out in the world, and you have the feeling we can trust each other, and if I tell him he will not publish already, immediately, then you can do it. Otherwise, that is a strong competition within the community, which will prohibit and limit you to do anything. That is the inner circle. The whole thing, actually, the science system, and we call it here like the innovation system, because eventually it should lead to any value added in the long term. In the whole system, we have some framework conditions. Let's go one by one through them. First of all, any science or any knowledge generation can be only as good as education you experienced and enjoyed before. It's very simple. If you go to a school which tells you only rhetorics, you will not be able to work in a lab where you need mathematics. That's for sure. Education systems, it's a big problem. And here, how should I say? I'm just coming back to Germany. Germany has 16 states. Education is an issue for each state. There is no federal education policy in Germany. Not bad at the one hand, but imagine you live in Germany, imagine you live in Munich. You have children going to school in Munich, and you want to go to Daisy or to Axfall, to Hamburg to work in Hamburg. Your family should move from Munich to Hamburg. Hamburg is a different state. It means the school system in Munich is different from Hamburg. You will move with your children from Munich to Hamburg, and the first thing your children will do is passing school entry examination. They have to take different courses in addition, or courses they took in Munich, they are not relevant in Hamburg. What the hell? Why should you put that pain on your children? Very strange. In addition, it's also only an episode of my personal experience. I have 2 children here in a German school in Moscow, following the German education standard. Funny, there's a German school, and 100 meters away, there's the Russian school. First difference. Well, the first common feature, they both start at 8 o'clock in the morning, but German school ends at 1300. 1 p.m., after that, nothing anymore. The Russian colleagues were slightly longer in school. Secondly, my kids wouldn't go to school on Saturday. Never, ever. Russian school, Saturday, it's normal. Thirdly, what I see in the curricula, comparing the curricula, the Russian students in school will learn a lot in mathematics, thinking, structures, things like that. My kids, they are perfect in presenting something. Rhetorics, language, blah, 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 blah. Cool thing. I don't like it. Not at all. Because this one here is not about presenting and marketing something. That is, first of all, developing something. So that is a big question. That's a big issue for the education system. That's a clear point. So that's what we see actually all over across Europe. Finland has an excellent system in school. Strong focus, natural science, mathematics, and think. But Finnish, like Russian students, and I'm sorry I excuse myself now already for my next statement, they have excellent, brilliant solutions, but presenting them, it's a lot to improve, put it diplomatically. However, in the long term, I think you will succeed and you will be successful if you have something to say, and not only some big buzzwords and some big bubbles which nobody understands and which will be replaced by the next buzzword in the next 5 years whatsoever, but some breakthrough, some fundamentals. Financial system. A financial system is the question, where do you get money from for scientific work, for research work, for innovation? The characteristics here is, of course, that you can never say how long will it take to achieve a result. First. Secondly, you cannot say what about the result. Will it meet certain requirements, yes or no? You cannot. There's an inherent uncertainty. And that's the question when it comes, you have to attract funding, you have to finance it somehow. How do you convince somebody to invest into your undertaking, which is so uncertain? Investment is typically into projects, ideas which are very close to application. Let's not call it market, very close to application. You have some high-risk funds, which of course invest in the very early stages already. But it's a question, it's a big issue. It's also about setting incentives for innovation. And these incentives are, well, first of all, a public attitude towards changes, technological changes, innovation in that sense. You can develop something, but innovation by definition is something which is being used and applied. So you need actually customers, a population, which is quite open to accept changes. And these changes, even if you have only lots of small innovation, these changes accumulate eventually, that people might be tired of all that changes over and over again. The question arises, how much change can population actually absorb? At what point, if you ask yourself, how far do I go? Isn't it enough now, all these changing things every day, every day, every day? You have the innovation in banking, you have the innovation with Moscow metro system, you have innovation at the airports with boarding cards and stuff like that. It's a continuous ongoing change. Sometimes you will ask and you will say, leave me alone. I just want to be alone and silent and not to change anything again. If I want to go by Aeroflot tomorrow from Sheremetyevo to Berlin, the next thing we will do is probably, I cannot have a printed ticket, but only a ticket which is on my smartphone. I don't have a smartphone now, I have to buy one and learn how to use it. All that small things. It's always changing, ongoing. The same holds true for most metro. You never know what happens next. And yet adjust and adapt, and so on. That's the big question, setting the incentive, building some incentive for people to think out of their box to change it, one thing, but at the same time, can you actually influence somewhat population to accept that, yes or no? Some theories exist to do that. Economics and related policies, that is something where is in the political sphere, in the policy sphere, the big belief that you simply invest into science, innovation follows, and economic development is also the logic consequence. Why not? In principle, it's a good idea, but what we see, especially in European countries, that regional governments in European countries, they consider, we simply establish a technopark or a science park here, and in 10 years we are the richest country everywhere in the world. Why not? But science is expensive, unfortunately. So usually at a European scale, investment is maybe 2-digit millions. Peanuts. Forget it. For that sum, you can build a new lab. That's it. Yeah, again, nice example, a nice German example. The Germans wanted to improve the system also, the science system, innovation system, by offering children different education. They said each German child should have the right or has the right to go into kindergarten starting the age of 1. Not bad, but we didn't have the infrastructure. What federal government did was building a lot of facilities for kindergartens. What they didn't think about is we need people working in there. So, we have kindergartens, we don't have teachers for the kindergarten. Cool thing, because we considered that here, like a boost for economic development. Once you give your kids to kindergarten, you can do some work, etc. But the investment was limited. Either big investment or none. That should be the conclusion. Research, science, technology, innovation policy, that is something which you are well aware of. It's about setting incentives. It's about also labor law related to scientists, related to science in the public sphere, but also in the private sphere. Labor law meaning, what about ownership of intellectual property? It's a big question. You make an invention in a lab financed by the federal government. So, who is the owner? The one who gives the money or the one whose brain developed that? What you usually do is you write an article, and then you say affiliation. A copyright is with the affiliation, the institute, not with you personally. It's a big issue when it comes to patents and to commercialize all that things, not with publications, not in that case. International networks. Question, of course, is how open is the national science system? For a policy side, it's very simple and very easy. You can say we establish funds or we give funds that scientists can travel abroad, join international events, invite foreigners here, build their communities. But why should they? They could assume our people are smart enough, they don't have to share their knowledge with the international community, and when we have spillovers from our knowledge, from the knowledge financed by our resources, but these spillovers lead to economic development in a different country. Bad idea. However, that also goes into, second case, goes into multilateral, multinational research institutions. Like take CERN in Geneva, the CERN for physics, astrophysics, particle physics. Why should Russia pay contribution there? XFAL, like X-rays in Hamburg with DAISY, or the International Space Station, ISS. What is actually an individual country advantage financing that for the sake of the global community. That is big issue, big discussion. That goes. Actually, you could argue we have the grand challenges coming, like water, health, aging society, and so on, blah, blah, blah. Everybody does it. We should establish global research labs which cover and tackle that problems. Why not? But from the policy side and from the normal logic thinking point, you will argue whatever we invest should be for the benefit of our country and our population. We don't care if it's of benefit for the Japanese, the South Koreans, and the Brazilians. Why should we? That's the point. Technology acceptance, we have already. Legal system. Legal system is mainly about intellectual property rights. We see it in a lot of countries where the IP system, from the legal point of view, from the point of view of laws and the text of a law, perfectly well. But enforcing that is a different story. That's one thing. Secondly, legal systems are different in all countries all over the world. Any of you has entered into an official cooperation agreement with an international partner? So the first thing what you do is you have to write and prepare a contract. And the contract is telling you what is the scope of cooperation, who owns what happens if not, and all that things. Now, funnily enough, the last clause of the contract will say Russian law applies or Swiss law applies or whatever. That's the first big challenge, the first issue. Which law applies if you have partners from two countries? Not so easy. Secondly, who's responsible for what and who's liable if something goes wrong? In a contract, you might formulate that in a cooperation contract, but it might be in contradiction to the legal system of the country you're working in. It could even could bring you into very sensitive, delicate constellation and situation that you might be sued for infringing the local law. That's a possibility. We made that experience last week when negotiating a contract with a Korean university to establish a double degree program for teaching. It's a nightmare. It's a real nightmare. From the technical point of view, we know exactly what we want to do. But labor law, that's one thing, is different in Korea from Russia. The smaller issue. Bigger issue is about education policy and education laws, like from the education part. The Koreans have different requirements, and they say each master program has to meet certain standards and follow these rules, which are not in line with the Russian. Certainly not. You have to be awfully creative, but it becomes a legal issue. And here, what you should do definitely is ask an attorney, ask a legal department in your institution to check, is there anything which infringes our Russian local law? If there is, then in case of such a double degree, no student would have any diploma in the end. Could be a consequence, or you're going to prison because doing something awfully bad and wrong. However, in such a case, you will be very, very happy talking to legal people. Discussion between, say, the researcher or the teacher who has only in mind to make something work, and then you have an attorney who doesn't know the difference between a book and an article, will drive you crazy somehow. So you go very much into detail. And you have to always consider also the legal system. Social systems, that is an issue when it comes to the competition for talent and for brains, how to generate, how to design the framework condition to attract and, probably more important, to maintain the inventive and innovative power. That's a social system, and that includes pension systems, that includes health and medical insurance, that includes unemployment systems, and all that stuff. So you have to provide and give some fertile ground that people feel somehow well. In that sense, when I said the Swiss have a very nice place like Zurich, they have one big disadvantage. Switzerland doesn't really know a social system. The first thing which happens when you enter into Switzerland and you take position at Zurich University or at ETH Zurich, you are being a non-Swiss national. You will get the first thing, a passport which is called foreigner passport. It's no joke. It's a passport which says in big head letters, foreigner's passport. It's quite discrimination. Secondly, if you are married and have children, you want to work in Zurich, be prepared to pay around about 3,000 Swiss francs. That makes 3,000 Swiss francs makes 3,000 US dollars roughly, quite 3,000 times 30, 90,000? No. Yes, 90,000 rupees, 100,000 rupees per month at least for giving your kids to a kindergarten or to school. The school is free for Swiss children, but not for foreign children, because you have the foreigner's passport. Bad, bad, bad idea. At the first sight, you look and you say, cool. ETH Zurich offers me a position, a chair at the university. It's a very good thing, excellent salary, I can do any work I want, etc., etc. Then you have your family there and you ask yourself, how should I survive it? Let's divide a circle, divide a constellation. Now, these are like the issues which are quite important to consider in the very first instance. I'm just looking at the watch, we should run a little bit. We have something like 20 more slides here. Now, who is actually responsible to take care, to finance the whole thing? So which are the responsibilities? Let's have a quick look here at a very simplified innovation process, like the basic steps or the basic elements you have in any radical innovation. Not talking about marginal. Like here, first we have research and development stuff. That's the R&D, the very basic blue sky research, which we can also divide between fully blue sky and some targeted blue sky, like mission-oriented. Secondly, there's some applied research where you have a target already. You consider and think of which field, which applications could it be. Then experimental development, which leads to prototypes, definitely the patents are already included. Then next, here, the first big thing comes, whatever you prepare and develop in your lab does not necessarily have the potential for mass production. Different story. Here you have a proof of principle. Yes, but this one, you don't produce one item anymore, or 10, but maybe 1 million or even more. That's a different story. When it comes to productions, logistics, purchasing, all that issues, a different story from what you did here. Last but not least, it goes somewhere into application and the market. What we can characterize here is the cost and the uncertainty of the whole thing, and it goes like here in the time horizon. So the time horizon is mainly, usually, quite long, couple of years. We're not talking about couple of days or couple of weeks, but couple of years. Now, uncertainty, which we see here, when we start, the first thing is an idea. An idea is a nice thing. Let's take a nice example. Remember back the first time you were in love, say in school time. You had the idea, this could be the perfect partner for me. That was your idea. It's like here. Basic, very basic, it's your idea. What you don't know is here you marry, but you have the idea here, this is my dream partner I want to have, how do I come here to get married? It's the same, actually, it's a good story. It's the same. You have that big idea, I like that person, I love that person. Unfortunately, the person doesn't know about it yet, and you want to marry that person. Like here, you have the big idea, what could be something to do some work on, some research, which I will solve and become a millionaire. That's using. You have to attract people to really use it. It's like here, you say, I love that person, which he or she doesn't know, and here's the marriage. There is some way in between. It might sound a little bit ridiculous, but the analogy is too obvious. A lot of different steps. Unfortunately, in that relationship, to convince that person to become your partner, you cannot go like structured like that. If you do that, and the partner, the potential partner, detects it, I'm sure will not like you. But it shows clearly that there's a huge uncertainty in between. There's the big idea, and you don't know exactly what follows. First, you might have the idea and just say, okay, let's run one experiment or two experiments. Experiments are unpredictable. That's why it's called an experiment. So you have to change the parameters, you have to change the setup, the establishment, and so on and so on. But the more often you fail, the more likely it becomes that you will succeed sometime. Except your brain says, oh no, I'm so tired, I don't want anymore. So it's a question of your own motivation. Uncertainty, however, decreases in course of time. Because here already, once you have the first basic idea and you see it might work in principle, you have to look for potential applications. You have to think of what could we use it for in more practical and pragmatic terms. So when you have here the idea, let's get married, no. Here you say, it's my perfect partner, and here you say, it's so perfect that we could marry. That makes your idea like perfect partner. Marriage is more specific. Perfect partner can be everything. Can be a perfect partner for 1 day or for 1 year. But you say, perfect partner, step 2, perfect partner for marriage. That is more specific and more concrete because you say, should be lifelong. The next step will be then, okay, how should the marriage look like? Becoming more concrete, like in a project plan. In the very first project plan, you have the big idea and you say, step 1 is idea generation, step 2 is experiments, step 3 is selling it. There are a lot of more idea steps behind, in between. So that's about the uncertainty. And the same holds true for the cost. Here, in the very early phases, it doesn't cost a lot. It costs your creativity, but in financial terms, neglectable. But the accumulation of cost, of course, increases. Because it would be so easy if it would be a linear process, idea, blah, 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 no failure at all. Okay, reality shows it explodes. And the explosion also comes here when it comes closer to the market, closer to the mass. So not only having the one prototype, but going into many, many, many more. So who's responsible? Well, naturally, in the big ideas, when it comes to the question, how do we answer the grand challenges facing our society? Well, it's a public good. The result should be a Nobel Prize, just for the indication. Nobel Prizes, I don't know the procedure behind awarding a Nobel Prize. Nobody really knows. We don't need to know. But at least, let's put it like reputation and recognition in the scientific community, but also a little bit more the outside community. In the more applied work, it's when the publications and the difference between a big prize like a Nobel Prize and the publication is quite clear. Any publication is very dedicated and targeted, so you don't explain the whole phenomena. A big prize like a Nobel Prize is being awarded for a phenomena, which equals, say, I don't know, 10 or 100 publications. You cannot really say, you have 100 publications, and when you're being awarded the Nobel Prize. Forget it. That equation doesn't work. A patent is quite here, usually the result of some experimental development, because patent document includes a full description of the invention. How does the system work? So, The scientific publication only describes some experiments, the outcomes, etc., etc., etc. The patent documentation is more specific. It's actually patent documentation is also the plan how the day of marriage should look like. 10 o'clock marriage, 11 o'clock lunch. Something like that. That's about the patent. And then it goes along here. Here, the closer we come to application and to the market, we come to the responsibility of the private sector, especially industry. Still, there's also a role for governments when we talk about social innovation. So that is mainly related to economic innovation, to private returns in that sense. And here, in between, we have a gap. We have the basic understanding or the basic feeling that we say, somehow government and industry will meet, and industry takes what government finances want and develops it further. I'm not sure. I don't think it really works. That's why we have some public-private partnerships, meaning that is joint cooperative work which brings together the brains with different background, like the brains from the basic research and the brains from the more applied and the development. That creates, first of all, an exchange of the ideas. It creates a mutual trust once they are in one room together, and it can leverage both. What we will see is, just keep in mind here, the 3 different types in the research field. Now, okay, first let's quickly have a look at the justification of expenditure on science. We have it here, geared, that is the gross expenditure on research and development, so all which is being spent in a country on research development in all the different fields. Basic research, applied research, development. And here, GDP per capita, we have a very nice statistical correlation. What we see, however, is we have a peak here. Like if you have a ratio of 2.5% good as percentage of GDP, then you might achieve a maximum. Still, if you look at the countries here, that's highly developed countries doing that stuff over the years, we have different framework conditions. Russia is somewhere over here. But that's the data 2010. We don't have the latest, the newest data. Russia might have moved somewhere here, but definitely not here, not yet. The question also arises, what is the ambition? Should you go here, or here, or here? In countries which are here, like our Scandinavian friends, Sweden, Finland, frankly spoken, I would ask, why do you spend so much on R&D? It doesn't deliver any more value to you. You've got a peak here, and that seems to be the optimal. However, everybody who knows a little bit mathematics and statistics will tell me immediately, if these would go here, the curve would change, of course. You need some crazy countries which try to go here, but you can keep the whole curve. That's why that's the problem with the statistics here. We cannot tell the optimum. I'm always quite amused hearing from Europe, European Union with the Lisbon goal, saying and stating we have to spend 3% of GDP on R&D. Where did we take the 3% from? Why 3%? Why not 2.5%? Why not 3.5%? So we don't have the full answer, but at least we can see some evidence that there is some correlation between. What we can also see is here, if you take the Russian data, Russia here 1997 up to 2011, we see actually expenditure on R&D here in the different years and GDP growing. If you look at the structure, you could actually argue we have the same expenditure in terms of relative expenditure. We have the same expenditure geared as percentage of GDP in 2011 like 1997. But GDP exploded in that sense. Definitely in nominal terms, absolute terms, GDP geared and expenditure increased. We have the best example here, like the Chinese continuous growth. I love that curve because these are difficult to interpret and to work on. So that's much easier having this. India is quite a nice map. We don't know actually where we are going. But some characteristics, and you can see it here, 2008 crisis. That changed, and then it went back, and so on and so on. Who else? Brazil, right? Brazil's kind of like the Chinese. We have some more modest changes in the GDP in total. What I want to show is, and to think is, how much do you invest in which type of science? That is a crucial issue. First of all, if you take like the percentage share of basic research from the total expenditure on R&D matched with applied research, and we see it in here, the diameter equals expenditure on development. Basically, we see four types. We see one type here, it's also quite well, highly developed countries. That is more type 2, more, well, maybe developed, maybe not. That is transition countries, Poland, Mexico. Poland, the Polish science system is strongly dependent on European funding, so different story. Here we have countries, candidates like Iceland, Portugal, Italy, which is also very, very strange. Characteristics you can see is in the first type what we had, a very high share on development, meaning we try to make something out of what we had developed in the very first instance. The second, high R&D intensity. Secondly, the second type, we finance everything. We don't have real priorities, obviously. It's not so successful. Type 3, that is the transition, just reshape. Type 4, stronger focus on applying basic research. Now, that's the most important, I guess. If you consider you spend $1 on basic research, now the big question comes, how much should you invest in terms of applied research and even then in development? What can we see? Two suspects, Japanese and Koreans. What did the Japanese do? And what did think about what did the Japanese do after World War II? First thing the Japanese did was shopping tour in Europe. Europe was broken. The Japanese went around Europe, bought facilities, bought patents, bought the know-how. For instance, optics. There was by no means any optical industry or optical science in Japan in 1950. By no means. That was the dominance of the Europeans. Japanese went there and took it. The Japanese, they invest $1 here. Then they go and invest around 160 in applying that, meaning this is one person, this is 1.6 person, and then whoops, 4. Compared to the one person developing or invested and engaged in the blue sky research, in the free thinking, we have 4 people. It's like me being here the one, and 4 people sitting here, listening and thinking, I do this, 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 and this, and this. So, we have quite a strong leverage. Then, we have countries like Poland, Portugal, Iceland, Italy. Funny thing, we assume they develop something new. They don't have actually the investment here to at least match what was developed here. So we waste quite a lot. And then we think, okay, 1.222, it's automatic. It will automatically generate innovations. It doesn't really work. Who else do we have? Yes, that is the type 3, that's Mexico, Poland. It's also quite strange. What we can see is, let's call it the valley of death. The big idea, the underlying principles, and the underlying conceptual knowledge comes from here. And now it's often happening in the countries that policymakers put the framework conditions to invest only in linear, no increase. Some say, if we spend it here, we want to see at least 4 people taking the idea, taking the knowledge, and exploiting it. So, that's, I have to switch it off, it's embarrassing. Right, I'm awfully sorry. That's why I have the old one. Probably a smartphone wouldn't do that because it's a very smart, intelligent telephone. Now, the point is, I don't have the data for Russia, unfortunately. But the point is, what you say here, that valley, either you say there's one person free in his mind, in his or her mind, in a lab, developing something new, and then we just put 2 to understand what the hell did that person do, and look for what could come out of that. But it needs to be scientists with a similar mindset. It doesn't need to be some artificial transfer organization or such things. That is a typical characteristics of the European systems, that you invest, the European countries invest in universities, and when they say what comes out from the universities, we have a technology and knowledge transfer office, which is equipped with public servants, and these people, they don't fully understand the system or the invention or the knowledge generated by the scientists. They don't. Public servant is something different, and they try to sell it. But for what sake? It doesn't bring much. If you want to generate value, it's about the brains, and it's about the relationship between 2 brains. So you cannot simply take 2 brains, put them on a table, and something in between, or just merge it with a shaker. It doesn't work. They must go from their own. That is the point here. Again, a small, modest increase from basic to applied, and then jump. Get up. Remember the optical industry, the leaders in optics until today, that's still Japanese. The Koreans following. If you look at Korean industrial development policy, the Koreans are closely following the Japanese example. So Samsung is a very nice example. Back in 1980s, what was the major product of Samsung? Flowers. Flowers, no joke. Flowers and a little bit shipbuilding. But when the Koreans decided, let's go, we cannot survive in the global dimension selling flowers. Like Nokia was boots. So Nokia came from boots, Samsung came from flowers. Nokia, okay, no comment about Nokia today. Samsung is quite strong in optics, is quite strong in semiconductors, microelectronics. Also, like Samsung, not sure, shipbuilding, I think it still is, and a few more. And Samsung is quite a smart strategy, but many industries you don't even see and detect the name Samsung, but it's behind. Why and how that happened? It's very simple. In 1980, Korean government decided we establish a think tank, which is nowadays Seoul National University. The SNU was established, and the Koreans were sent out throughout the world. If you look now, and they took their PhDs, especially in Harvard, Cambridge, blah, blah, blah. If you look today at SNU faculty, each of them holds American PhDs. But they came back. And in a concerted effort, they built the Samsung and the LG and the Hyundai of today. That is the point. Everybody was behind it. What the Koreans did not do, they did not establish different institutions at once. They said, first we focus at one, and we make that one successful. It cannot be done by policy, but they set the framework condition, they set the incentives. They sent the Koreans out, they came back voluntarily, and they saw we have all freedom, we can do something here. It's like what we see here in the area around. Once you start working here, be sure government will not intervene. Just do whatever you want. And that is the incentive and that is the motivation. And that's what you see with the Koreans. So it showed first successes like with SNU, with the Seoul National, and they started building the second, like KAIST, the third, and the fourth. They have 4 such poles, actually, which are all centered around certain application and products. They thought first, what could be the products, and they asked themselves, what do we need to generate and prepare such products? So they did kind of foresight for S&T policy, for S&T priorities, but they did not simply look and ask which science fields and technology areas are the most promising. They asked what are challenges, what are demands in 10 or 20 years' time. They made some assessment. There's some uncertainty in, that's for sure, we can be wrong, but if you have 10 potential demands for the next 10 years, at least one, you will be right. So you can avoid and you can afford being wrong in the other 9. No problem. And step 2, we ask, what knowledge and competence do we need for that? Which they bought by sending their stuff, their people over around the world. And they come back. Now, different modes what we have here is the big question, who is actually doing the research? Well, first year, the share of companies is spending on company R&D, and then we have higher education and public research institutes. What we see Russia, by tradition, from the systemic point of view. Higher education, meaning universities and research, that was not a common feature in the last centuries. Most universities were and still are teaching institutions. Whereas what you can find, if you take the Swiss, from the historic perspective, research and teaching was always incorporated in Swiss institutions, but only in the Swiss federal institutions. Now, remembering back, Switzerland has 2 federal universities, Zurich and Lausanne. We have canton universities like University of Zurich or University of Appenzell or whatsoever, very small, which are also only teaching institutions. But however, the big ones, the federal universities, make the largest share on expenditure at all. That's why Switzerland here is very high in the share of higher education and public performance R&D. The big advantage, naturally, is once you have the research activities within the university, that gives you the chance to get the students from the auditorium to the lab and show them what is new. So you don't need to read the old book to them all the time, but getting them the state-of-the-art knowledge. However, Swiss, Austrian, Swedish, and also Finnish, when we say very high share of companies engaging in R&D, be cautious about that. Cautious for one reason. It means all companies with registered headquarters in these countries. In case of Switzerland, that includes Roche, Novartis, Nestlé, ABB, and such companies. But don't assume that all R&D or research innovation activities by Roche or Nestlé are being done in Switzerland. No way. What is done there, and that comes to more the innovation, the organization of innovation activities, what is done there at the headquarters, they prepare and develop the master plan for the whole company. They have their R&D and innovation labs spread around the globe, everywhere in many, many countries. So, take the example of Roche. What Roche is doing, they have corporate R&D, they have their budgets, and they have their principal priorities. Then they say, let's formulate, let's develop R&D projects on a certain topic, and they launch an internal Roche competition between Roche Switzerland, Roche Russia, Roche Singapore, and Roche United States labs. And they launch a competition. How do the labs want to proceed and do the project work? But the work is not done in Bale. The work is done somewhere in the US, in Singapore, or in Russia. However, in that aggregate terms, total R&D spending, since it's corporate R&D, it's in the balance sheet of R&D of corporate, and Switzerland is very high up here. So be cautious about that data and figures. Might be somehow misleading. It might be also the question for Russia, 70% in companies' labs, right? That's also including design labs, design companies, which are somewhat in between the big middle. Now, what else do we have? I think we should rush a little bit, thinking quickly about how the systems are organized. That's actually the topic of the lecture, of the presentation today, which we didn't tackle at all. There's always the point, science is usually established and follows the political structure. Now, first of all, federal setups like Switzerland and Germany. Germany, we have 16 states. Anybody knows how many cantons we have in Switzerland? 26. I think 8 million inhabitants in Switzerland, 26 cantons. The average size of a canton is very nice, it's very modest. The point, and we will see it here with different actors, becomes more crucial. We have countries which are very strongly regulated with a strong top-down approach. The federal approach, like Germany, Switzerland, we try to follow more the bottom-up approach, which leads naturally to many small fields and niches being occupied. But the more structured, like the Chinese, Japanese, and the Koreans, have a more strict, and we saw it also in the expenditure slide, a more linear and progressing expenditure in the different fields. The federal organized systems have more the value of depth inherent. In principle, we have the research organizations in all countries which make a strong pressure on policymakers for allocating budgets, setting priorities. We have the higher education institutions. They have usually their councils, internal university councils or external councils, developing recommendations, what should be done, in which fields, in which regulations. We have for companies, small and medium-sized companies, multinational companies, and for the multinational companies, we see one phenomena that these companies, they say, actually, we don't care where we have our labs. The world is big, we can find the best talent wherever we want, so they put pressure on governments and say, give us funding, give us subsidies, tax credits, give us all advantages which we want. If you don't give it to us, so what? We close operations and go to the next country. It's a big, big, strong danger. What we know from innovation theory is that the big innovation normally don't come from here. They come from the small and medium-sized. Why is that? The big conglomerates, the big multinational companies, they are organized and structured like any university, any research lab. Very straight organization charts, limited freedom and creativity. Naturally. That's the point. What makes them innovative in the end is a lot of takeovers. They have a lot of cash. They buy in. They not necessarily develop internally. They buy it in from external sources. Take the latest mergers acquisition or the shopping tour by Google. Crazy. Google will become one of the most innovative companies in the next 5 years. Quite for sure, but not because internal innovativeness. Buy in. Simply takeovers. We have public bodies, we have national public bodies at the federal level, and we have public bodies at the regional level. Then we have funding agencies and we have industry associations. All of them play a role when it comes how to organize science. What are requirements towards the status of a scientist, or what's the requirements toward priorities and all that issues. Not to forget about scientific and academic associations, or similarly councils. We have a lot of them. Now imagine a country like Switzerland with 26 cantons. You have all these at federal level, plus at regional level, times 26. Bring these people together to build a joint vision for the country. The Swiss have one strong, powerful instrument, which is called the BFI Botschaft. That is the message for education, research, and innovation. That is a message spanning a 4-year time horizon, fixing priority areas where to invest public money and which sums to invest. It takes them 5 years to prepare such a message, to prepare the priorities, to prepare and to decide who gets what for the next 4 years. It takes them 5 years. For the Swiss, it includes discussions with them, all of them. So we are now in the process of preparing the message for 2016-17, but it will be developed only quickly earlier. Now, the framework conditions which we are talking about, we had a little bit earlier, is like the investment spending. It's like different policies, especially immigration or education policy, labor, the legal framework, tax schemes, economic development, and external relations. Now just imagine this versus that. It's a very complex picture which arises, and a lot of different fields which need to be considered. For time reasons, I'm not going through that, but you will have it. That gives you some of the tasks and the interests the different actors have in designing the whole system. It looks like, eventually, at the national level like that. Typically, you have someone like a chancellor, a president, however you call it, and below a cabinet. Aside, a parliament. A parliament is usually powerless. A parliament is just there to say, okay, we do it. Here at federal level, it goes ahead. You have different ministries. Now, you've got a Ministry of Economics, or a Ministry of Labor, Education, Science, Justice, etc., etc. There's one country in the world, which is Denmark. Denmark has a ministry we call Ministry of Innovation. But the Ministry of Innovation in Denmark is simply a merger between the Ministry of Economics and the Ministry of Education and Science. The merger happened something like 8 or 9 years ago. Until then, Ministry of Education and Science had their offices in one street in Copenhagen, Ministry of Economics located in a different street. What changed since then is the title and the logo. They still have 2 offices, one somewhere close to the Black Sea, close to the Baltic Sea, and one somewhere different. The internal structure of the organization didn't change, not much. So still, within the Ministry of Innovation in Denmark, economics people don't necessarily talk to people who are setting the S&T, the ST, the science priorities. Doesn't bring much. Again, no, not again. Below that, that's the national and federal level, you've got the regional level. Now the same goes on. You have a prime minister, president, or however you call it, at the regional level, and you have different ministries at regional level, and so on and so on. Then we are talking about, actually we're not talking about the competition between countries anymore. It's not a competition between Germany, Japan, and Russia. Forget it. It's a competition between regions. It's a competition between Moscow and Zurich and, say, Berlin and Germany. Not about the countries, but the regions. And internally in the country. That is the point. Regional level, many, many times. And besides from that, all that associations. Everybody will take some influence at each of the different bodies which we have here. Now, it makes it more and more and more just streamlined and simplified below the innovation process. It makes it more complicated when it comes to setting framework conditions and priorities for science. So it's about higher education institutes for HEI, PRO, public research institutes or organizations, science associations. Public research organizations is also a funny thing, because usually what you consider a research organization, you say that's equal to an institute. That's wrong. When we talk about the Russian Academy of Science, actually it's not existing. The Russian Academy of Science is quite a holding, it's an overhead, but doing nothing. It's the institutes below. So, need to talk about the institutes of the Russian Academy of Science who are doing it, not the academy itself. It's the same, a mistake which often happens talking about the German Fraunhofer Society. Fraunhofer Society, like Fraunhofer, like Max Planck, or Helmholtz Society in Germany, that is on paper only. That's an overhead, that's a holding. You need to think about the institute. And there are, for Fraunhofer, 78 institutes. Max Planck, I'm not sure, something like 60, more than 60 institutes. So you're not in contact and cooperating with Fraunhofer Society, but with the institute, with your colleague, lab to lab, exchanging ideas. You're not exchanging ideas between your institute's legal department and Fraunhofer big overhead legal department. Forget it. Always bear that in mind. Science associations, associations of physics or chemistry or things like that who think about different issues. Now, in research, the industry associations come and they say, now let's focus on certain research areas and spend public money for dedicated applications, which might contradict this one here. And then it goes like application, and in the implementation, eventually you got a large number of different actors which make the big pictures. You will have the full presentation. We make a stop here because we are really running out of time. And I admit, in my 20 or 30 years of experience now in the business, I never made it one presentation with more slides. So 15 more are following, but talking is much more funny when reading out what's written on this slide. Thanks a lot for your attention. Enjoy Skolkovо, and thanks a lot for bringing the sun and the summer back to Moscow. We didn't have it last week. It was my pleasure being here. Thank you very much.
Maybe 2 questions.
I have one question about the situation in association, university and research institutes. You have information from Germany, and I know you was in Japan, and you know the situation in Japan. I want in our team we have a point of view that university must be alone, and the scientific research institute must directly make science, not education. And what do you think about this situation? And I want to take your offer for us how we need to make in Russia. Associate university and research institute or not? What do you think about it?
I think it's a good point if you have both together. But the question is how much teaching? There is a form of teaching if you get away from lectures but go more into seminars or lab work, which is part of teaching, part of curricula. Seminars, I love it. You can take the students and you can place a very provocative question to the students and let them prepare an essay or something like that. It's a limited burden in terms of teaching. And it offers you the chance to get also some input from the students. That's what I always see we are somehow trapped in our knowledge and our thinking. The student enters, at least at master level, bachelor level, a little bit more sensitive, but at master level, if you ask a question to a student, he comes with ideas you never thought about, because you're too long and you're like in one box, but it needs kind of seminars very open, in a small group. Don't go into a seminar with 80 students, it doesn't work. But something like 5 and ask them, how would you do it? But it's nice inspiration.
But I think that in Russia is very big, in university, big university has big bureaucratic, but in Germany, I know that a few years ago, beginning process to make bigger university, to associate university and research institute, and how you in Germany decide and how the solution for this problem.
No solution. It's the same nightmare.
You have bureaucratic.
Yes.
Yes. Big.
Yes.
And the work
probably
very
worse. Worse than Russia. It depends on the institution. Depends on which university you go. What you have also, that's quite a good thing. In Germany, the Fraunhofer Society, the Fraunhofer Institute is always affiliated with a university. So the director, the head of the Fraunhofer Institute, holds a chair at the university. That's a good thing, where especially for master students and especially PhDs. So you can work more practical terms with Fraunhofer Institute and prepare your PhD at the university. Not bad, but it requires a strong and a lot of one-time investment establishing regulations. Once regulations are in place, okay, it's fine. But establishing regulations, what I just mentioned about a double degree program for a master program, we fixed and finished last week. It took us 1 year writing, preparing regulations, agree with our partners in Seoul, but in Moscow we have Bolshoi Soviet academics. If you introduce something new, there's one clear message. There are teachers and professors in the institution for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. They will not like your idea. They will tell you, that's our regulation, that's right. You might have a different opinion. Yeah. It takes a while. But it's nothing special for Russia.
Okay, thank you.
Just to make it short about your lecture, how would you say in brief words, what is the main bottleneck for the Russian science to develop well and to meet the industry needs and so on? Just what do we need to succeed? Thank you.
I think in principle, the science is quite well developed. The big bottleneck is making it measurable in terms of output. That's one point. Publications are usually used as a measure, as an indicator. Many of the, especially older generation, they will prepare publication in Russian but not in English. First point. Second point, we should not forget that is a phenomena over the last decades. We had the science system in the East and in the West. Now, the Eastern scientists entering the Western community, and that community, if you submit a paper to a journal, you have an editor who is member of the Western community. Now, something like 80 to 90% of editors of all journals are British, Canadian, US American. And you know about performance measurement. At the end of the year, they are evaluated against their publications. What happens? Editor 1 knows editor 2, calls him, says, take my paper, I take your paper. First point. So it's not always as fair as we think. Secondly, we need to be well aware of the fact that in the established community, why should the editors of the journals allow building more competition from a different country? Which Russia in that case. The same holds true for Brazilian, Argentine, South African, etc., who were not members of the community earlier on. So that's additional competition. And me being editor, I wouldn't allow it. I'm not crazy. It's also about my performance indicator, and the performance indicator determines the salary. That's quite the reality. We can say that here, we should not say that in public sometimes. Especially not if international editors are in the room, so they might block us from any publications later on.